everyone, to another episode of a Wine Affair podcast. I am super excited today to have our guest on, Allison Sloot from Cab Franc Chronicles.
Yay.
It has been, she was one of the first people I thought of when we started this. I have been a fan of hers for quite a while, unbeknownst to her and then beknownst to her. And I want to welcome you, Allison. I'm cheersing you with my glass here to our podcast.
Cheers.
Pour myself a little more.
There you go.
It's almost the weekend, right?
Exactly.
Almost, yeah. It's always almost the weekend. We always start our podcast by saying what's in your glass and talking a little bit about what we're drinking.
Sure.
And you gave me an excuse to pour some more Cab Franc, so thank you for that. Do you want to go first since you're our
Sure.
guest?
Yeah. I opened nothing crazy. Actually, this is my I opened my for the sake of we have a video component. So this is an Ontario Cabernet Franc from Vineland Estates. And this is my house wine. This is the wine. There's always cases of it in my house, and it is the wine that I open when I just need a glass of wine and I don't really want to think too much. And it's 100% Cabernet Franc. It's done all in stainless steel, so there's no wood on it. And this wine retails in Ontario for $15.95 Canadian, so that's like $12 US, you know. So it's just an outstanding value. And the winemaker for Vineland Estates, Brian Schmidt, he's been the winemaker for now 30, I'm going to get the number wrong. I think 2023 was his 32nd vintage at Vineland Estates. He's been making wine there forever. And he is about as obsessed with Cabernet Franc as I am. Like we get together often and taste at the winery, and I bring him bottles of things and we open stuff, and it's like we talk Cab Franc all the time. So it only seemed appropriate to open something to give him a shout out, because he's one of the big Cab Franc nerds I know, besides me, of course.
I love that.
Andy, you want to go next?
Sure. So I picked, it's one of my not everyday go-tos, but it's been a fun one that I found for Cabernet Franc. It's actually from Seneca Lake, so it's a fingerling,
Nice.
fingerling lake from New York. So I found this one last year when I would do cool climate versus warm climate comparisons, and I always love that because I don't know if you can see through the. It's a little harder. I poured myself a little too much. It's like we said, it's almost the weekend, so let's cheers to that. But it's definitely lighter, so it's true, like a little more of a ruby color, but it has more of those red notes and more of the herbaceous fragrances that I really like with the Cab Franc. So
Nice.
I figured I'd open up this one and cheers
Fabulous.
from
I love
the
it.
New York.
Nice. Well, I went back to that one that I really liked from Virginia. This is the Tower Series Cabernet Franc from Gordonsville, Virginia.
Cool.
2019. And Andy is the one actually who turned me on to Virginia Cab Franc.
Nice.
Yes.
And I just fell in love with this. It has that like cedar floor and herb and just all that stuff that I love about Cab Franc.
Awesome.
And it's just but it's so fresh still. It's so, it's not too much oak and it's not too fruity. It's like kind of that nice middle spot for me. So it's really, really nice. I really like this one a lot.
That's great. We're hanging out in North America for our Cab Franc adventure today. That's awesome.
Yeah. So because we have all different regions here, can you dip your toe a little bit and just tell us a little bit more about these regions for us?
Sure. Yeah. In terms of North America, as it relates to Cabernet Franc, really California is where the most plantings are, but curiously, as much as there's, I think, the most acreage in terms of Cabernet Franc in California, unsurprisingly, there isn't a lot of single varietal Cabernet Franc. It's often used as a blending partner with Cab Sauv and Merlot. So really, in terms of the United States, the big regions for Cabernet Franc as a single varietal wine are the Finger Lakes and Virginia. And it's interesting because they're two very different climates. Virginia is a more moderate climate, so definitely warmer. There's more humidity there, whereas the Finger Lakes is, I don't know if they call themselves a cool climate. It can get pretty warm during the summertime because the climate in the Niagara region where the wine that I'm drinking is from is very similar to the Finger Lakes. But indeed, the Finger Lakes has really extreme temperatures, very, very cold winters, warmer summers. But compared to Virginia, it's a very different climate. So you're getting very different expressions from those two regions. And actually, there's a lot of diversity between the two. I think in general, my experiences with Virginia Cabernet Franc is they do tend to be a little bit riper, a little bit fuller bodied, whereas the Finger Lakes is a little bit more sort of light to medium bodied, some of the more of those herbaceous undertones. Actually, the Finger Lakes also makes some really outstanding Cabernet Franc Rosé, which I think should be more of a calling card for the Finger Lakes, but nobody seems to take rosé seriously. But I really have enjoyed a lot of Finger Lakes Cabernet Franc Rosé. But in terms of the Niagara Peninsula, basically in terms of Ontario as a growing region, where I don't know how familiar you ladies are with Niagara as in terms of a growing region, but basically the Niagara Peninsula is where the majority of the wine in Ontario is produced, and the latitude of the Niagara Peninsula is on par with kind of northern Oregon. It's in between Bordeaux and Burgundy from a latitude perspective. So we get very warm summers. We have very cold winters, obviously, but it's perfect conditions for ripening Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Sauvignon still doesn't really ripen in most vintages, where Cabernet Franc you can consistently ripen every vintage, and it's the #1 planted red variety in Ontario. So it's an important grape for the province, and it's really actually it's Ontario Cabernet Franc that kind of kick-started my little rabbit hole adventure with this grape variety. So
love that.
Okay, so great segue, because my next question to you was going to be, tell us that journey. What ignited this passion in you for Cabernet Franc?
The kind of the Coles Notes version of it is I started working in the wine industry it was August of 2007. Out of university, I studied business. I had an economics and finance degree in school. I was in banking for a few years, hated it, got out very quickly, and basically thought, okay, I love food, I love wine, maybe a career path in wine is something I can do. So I moved to wine country, managed to land a job that I was not qualified for, but I had a boss that saw something in me and said, okay, I basically got hired to do the international sales for a winery in the Niagara region. Wow. And like I said, I was not qualified for this job whatsoever. But my boss saw something and he was like, yeah, you're hired. I was like, cool. So basically I did this role for almost 8 years, about 7.5 years. And doing our international sales, our main export was ice wine, because that's what Canada is known for. Mm-hmm. And so I was traveling all over. We exported quite a bit. I was traveling to Asia. I was traveling to Europe, the US, the Caribbean, all over the place. And the main export was ice wine, but we always exported a white and a red, in small quantities usually, but to do wine dinners and, kind of for those niche customers that were looking for something different. So the winery that I worked for, our flagship red was a Cabernet Franc. And our flagship white was a blend of Gewürztraminer and Riesling, a little off dry, really delicious, kind of quaffable white. And then we had Cabernet Franc, and those were our white and red that we presented kind of to the international market. And it made perfect sense because Merlot was in that funk that nobody wanted Merlot, even though we did a great Merlot. We couldn't ripen Cabernet Sauvignon very well. So Cabernet Franc was this grape that we could confidently say, okay, this is this is who we are. This is what works well. This is a, and so I spent almost 8 years traveling the world talking about Cabernet Franc for the company I worked for. And basically, just the nature of my personality, and I didn't want to look like an idiot in front of people. I just started to, like, if I was traveling places and I saw a Cabernet Franc on a wine list at a restaurant somewhere, I'd be like, oh, I got to order that and see what that tastes like. And, or if I went to a trade show and I had some free time and I could go taste Cabernet Franc from different places, I would be like, oh, I got to go and taste those. So I knew, like, it was all just reconnaissance. It was just trying to understand what the world of Cabernet Franc looked like so that I could better, position what we were doing and tell our story in a better way. And that's kind of how it, like, kind of started. And then basically I moved to the US back in 2015, and I lived in Miami, Florida for almost 6 years. And moving from Ontario, which is a control market, we have a monopoly set up here where the government controls our access to alcohol, because that's fun. And it makes them lots of money.
Yeah.
To pay for our health care and all those wonderful things. But basically, I moved to Florida, and it was, it was the Wild West. I could buy anything and everything. And so, I just started to shop online, and I found cool stuff, and I subscribed to a few of these, online retailers that did, like, oh, we'll ship you, this is the deal for the month or the deal for the week. And so I just started acquiring bottles and tasting as much as I could. And that's kind of where that, so it's been a long time, the culmination of where I am today with Cab Franc Chronicles and all of that whatever that thing is that I'm doing. So but it's been my whole career that this has been my passion.
It's fascinating. I love that. And I think it's cool too. So as you've been trying all of the different Cab Francs, I kind of do the same thing. I studied wine, moved to Virginia where it was very prominent and you could find it single varietal, but it's not that common. Like it's hard to find by itself. So where would you say were some of the coolest places you would find a Cab Franc from? So from your menu research, from your ordering research, your trade show days, what were some of the kind of top places that you were surprised?
Well, I always, the Loire was always something that was close to my heart. And when we used to do a big trade show. There's a big trade show that happens every year for wine in Dusseldorf, Germany. And the winery that I worked for always presented at that trade show. So every time I had a break, I could, like, zip to the Loire section, and it wasn't too far of a walk, and I could, like, just power taste. But in terms of regions that, I've encountered a lot of really interesting bottles. I remember this is back in probably 2012. I was on a business trip to London, and I was with my importer. We were at a great restaurant in the UK in London, and there was a Cabernet Franc from the Yarra Valley, Australia, on the list. And I remember it was the only single varietal Cabernet Franc on the entire wine list. It was from the Yarra Valley, Australia. And I was like, well, we got to try it. And my importer was like, really? Like, all of these wines, and that's the one you want to order with dinner? And I'm like, yeah, that's the one I want to order with dinner. And to this day, it's one of those, it remains, like, stuck in my head. Like, I can remember, how where you have those moments where, 10, 15 years later, you can literally remember the like ambiance, what the table looked like, the place setting, the cutlery, the menu. So it was one of these weird scenarios where I can literally, like, close my eyes and visualize this restaurant and see that bottle of the Yarra Valley Cabernet Franc from the winery is called Jamshed. And I to this day, it's still one of those. I haven't had it actually since then, but it still remains one of those cool Cabernet Francs that I was just like, that's awesome. Like, cool. Yarra Valley, cool climate, Australia. I'm into it. Let's do it. But I've had Cabernet Franc from Slovenia. I was very fortunate. So curiously, Brazil has a very long history of wine production. And Cabernet Franc was actually the #1 planted red variety back in like the 1940s and 50s.
Okay.
And then the government, excuse me, the country went through kind of all this upheaval politically and economically, and there was this whole vine pull scheme, and a lot of Cabernet Franc got pulled out. Cab Sauv became more fashionable. That went in, so did Merlot. But back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, Cabernet Franc was like the grape of Brazil as far as international varieties. So I actually I have a friend who's Brazilian who just moved to Ontario just a couple of years ago, and with him he brought a bottle of 1955 Cabernet Franc from Brazil that we opened together and tasted, and it was an emotional experience. Like I had never had a Cabernet Franc that old, let alone from Brazil. And there was this whole backstory behind it, and it was just super, super cool. So yeah, that's the interesting thing about Cabernet Franc is it's planted everywhere. You figure, like, you think anywhere where there's Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, there's probably Cabernet Franc planted not too far away, just because of Bordeaux and that influence and the assemblage of those grape varieties in Bordeaux, and how many new world regions then kind of emulate Bordeaux by creating those blends. Cabernet Franc is everywhere. It's just not given the same attention as its two children, I should say.
Yes.
So that's a good segue too, because I wanted to ask you about aging in Cabernet Franc.
Yeah.
So is that the oldest bottle you've had, or is there one? I imagine by now there's probably older that you've had.
No, actually, to date, that is still the oldest bottle of Cabernet Franc that I have enjoyed. And I admit that it was probably not in the best of shape, but that was not the point. It was actually, it was cool to taste, and but Cabernet Franc ages really, really well. Really, really. I'm trying to think of what else I've had. Maybe without like any sort of like as a single varietal Cabernet Franc, I think the only other one that I've had older or kind of older is a 79 Chinon. I've had a lot of 82 Chinons, but not too much beyond that as far as Cabernet Franc is concerned.
And what have you noticed as it ages about that particular varietal? Like what happens to it as it gets that old?
Oh, it gets really interesting. It becomes, well, like all old wine, it evolves into this. You get a bit of that mushroom, you get some Cabernet Franc with age can show a bit of like a tobacco leaf thing. It can show that when it's younger as well. Like Niagara Cabernet Franc always seems to have a little bit of a tobacco leaf thing. So I find that Cabernet Franc with age can develop a nice cured tobacco, not cigar in the classic sense, but more just, I don't know. Yeah, like if you picked up, like if you just had like rolling tobacco or, something like this, as opposed to like a classic cigar, it's like just fresh kind of cured tobacco, which has a really distinctive perfume to it. The florals become more intense as well. So Cabernet Franc inherently, so in terms of Cabernet Franc, as in terms of the flavor components or the aromas, I always say that there's always a floral component, an herbaceous component, fruit, of course, and then spice are kind of the four pillars that is Cabernet Franc. And so those florals can come through in a bit more pronounced potpourri-like way with age. The spice often comes forward, and the spice is not because of oak. Cabernet Franc as a grape variety is a spicy grape, even when it's in an unoaked form. Like I'm sure that Osmote probably has a little bit of a spicy kind of profile to it, because I find Finger Lakes Cabernet Franc to be a little bit spicy, like spicy, peppery, but there's also like kind of, it can show baking spices, but it can also show like peppercorn and things like this, and capsicum and chili flake and all those kinds of things. So Yeah, those spice profiles can come forward a lot more. Another interesting thing that I sometimes get on older Cabernet Franc is more of a um, almost more of a orange, which sounds kind of weird, but like a blood orange or like a candied citrus note with older Cabernet Franc, which is kind of interesting. Particularly certain examples from the Loire comes through with this beautiful, like almost like a chocolate covered orange rind, candied orange rind that's dipped in dark chocolate. Like if you imagine that in a wine, Cabernet Franc can do that with age, which is really amazing. So yeah, it's I haven't had as many examples of older Cabernet Franc from like New World regions. More my experience in that regard is from the Loire Valley, but definitely it's an exciting grape to lay down for a little while and watch it do its thing.
That's neat. I haven't been able to do that, but I do. I used to love kind of just hiding some bottles and letting them age. And I think that was the neat part, you talking about the aged ones. And I know a handful of our listeners, when they're listening to the show, are just trying to like expand their wine horizons. And, people know Cabernet Sauvignon, but tell us a little bit more, like, why should they look for a Cabernet Franc like you did for so many years? Like, why should we seek out this particular varietal?
Yeah, for me, there's a lot of reasons. There's the versatility of the grape. So Cabernet Sauvignon, as an example, Cabernet Sauvignon is it's a tannic variety. It's got thick skins. It produces big wine, and it's really a grape variety that kind of needs oak to support its bigness. So it's very hard to find Cabernet Sauvignon that is subtle, we'll say, for lack of a better word. Whereas Cabernet Franc has thinner skins, it has higher acidity, and it does have some of those kind of herbaceous undertones to it. So because Cabernet Franc is a bit more elegant, it's a bit more finesse driven as a variety. It's lighter, it's softer. That means that there's a lot more that you can do with Cabernet Franc. It makes great rosé, but it also makes reds that are fruity and fresh in terms of their style and easy drinking, like lower tannins, soft, kind of fun, juicy styles. But it also can make those structured styles where there's maybe a bit of wood aging, more concentration, more body. So from a versatility factor, to explore this grape is really cool because you can literally you can have it often and always try something a little bit different. But also I find because it's not as well known as Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, you can get really affordable examples too. So you think of what your average Cabernet Sauvignon from California costs these days. Like it's bananas. It's you're talking a good Napa Cab is what, $100 easily. There's not too much below that. But even California Cabernet in general, it's a premium price, or at least the good stuff is.
The big names.
Yeah, exactly. But Cabernet Franc from Virginia, from the Finger Lakes, from the Loire Valley, like from Argentina, you can get some banging wines for under $25, even under $20 for that matter. Like there's fabulous Cabernet Franc from the Loire, from places like Chinon that you can get for $15, $12 US. Are they going to blow your mind with complexity? No, but that's not what they're meant for. Those wines are meant to be just quaffable, companionable, delicious, Tuesday night kind of wines. But it is a wine that you can, actually that was part of the reason why I kind of dove into Cabernet Franc as well when I was working for this winery is, this was in the kind of late aughts, so we're talking 2008 through 2012-ish, and Burgundy was already creeping up in price, and I was single, I'm not making a ton of money, so I couldn't afford to try Burgundy, to drink those fancy Pinot Noirs that everybody else was drinking. So I grabbed Cabernet Franc because it was affordable and I could drink more of it, essentially. But that's another great reason is its affordability. But also I just find it's a bit more approachable. You know, it doesn't need wood. Actually, I find I prefer Cabernet Franc when it doesn't have too much of a wood influence, which makes it really accessible from a food pairing standpoint. So, you know, Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, it's a big wine. You tend to need like to pair it with big proteins or those kinds of dishes, whereas Cabernet Franc in the right style can easily go with vegetable dishes because it naturally has that vegetal herbaceous thing going on. So you think dishes like that have tomato, eggplant, zucchini, kale, like any kind of vegetable, well, peppers, obviously, any sort of bell pepper, something or other. It's perfect. It's the great red that seems to go seamlessly with, you know, pizza and sausages and just mushrooms. It literally, I love cooking, and I cook every night, and I cook everything from scratch, and that's my decompression is to spend time in the kitchen. And I literally, when I'm cooking, I can stand at my wall of Cabernet Franc and be like, there is literally, aside from seafood, there's a Cabernet Franc for just about anything on the planet from a culinary perspective, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Which makes it really fun, because you can think outside the box as far as like most people think, okay, well, if I'm having duck breast, I should have Pinot Noir. If I'm having this, then I would choose, you know, Nebbiolo or something like this. But I think there's Cabernet Franc equivalents that can go with just about anything. Like I said, with the exception of seafood, which is a little bit on the harder side. But then there's rosé, so you can always like find ways to slide in. And actually, there's even there's some great examples of white Cabernet Franc being made as well, which is kind of wild. So like, as opposed to rosé, like a direct press with no skin contact. And Leah Jorgensen out of Oregon makes a white Cabernet Franc, and she ages it in larger, I think 500 or 600 liter barrels. And she almost treats it like a white wine, but it has these little flutters of the Cabernet Franc personality in there. And it's a really outstanding wine. So there's
Wow.
seafood is possible if you have the right Cabernet Franc too.
Oh, I'm excited to try that. That's awesome.
Yeah, Leah's wines are fantastic. Leah, so there's not a lot of Cabernet Franc in Oregon, but she is the flag bearer. I think she is like coined as Cabernet Franc, like the Oregon Cabernet Franc queen. Like that's her thing. Is she makes a white, a rosé. She makes 2 or 3 different red wines from Cabernet Franc every vintage. She does a really cool blend as well of Cabernet Franc and Gamay as well, that she calls, I don't even remember now, but Cabernet Franc and Gamay as a blending, as an assemblage is common in the Loire Valley. So she does that as well. So she is all gung-ho about Cabernet Franc. So her wines are worth seeking out for sure.
Wow.
Will do.
What are some of your absolute favorite food pairings with Cab Franc?
Oh,
like top 3.
I love, like, so one of my like go-to, like, I think that Cabernet Franc is the ideal steak wine, in my opinion. I think that because it has great acidity, it has good structure, but it doesn't overpower in the same way that Cab Sauv can. So if you have the right Cabernet Franc with the right tannin profile and the right kind of concentration, I think it can be really fantastic with a steak. When was it? New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, I cooked myself a steak au poivre. Like I did a green peppercorn sauce with like a nice ribeye steak, and I had a really sexy Cabernet Franc, and it was off the charts delicious.
Wow.
What else is really good? I would say that number one, my death row meal, desert island meal is probably duck confit. And I think Cabernet Franc works awesome with duck confit. Um, and I would say probably number three, which I don't do very often, but I think Cabernet Franc is a wicked pizza wine too, because
I would agree.
tomato sauce, if you've got like some sort of salumi or pepperoni, like all those kind of spicy charcuterie type meats work so well with like a juicy, lighter style of Cabernet Franc. And then of course, if you factor in, like if you're the type of person that loves olives on your pizza, or like peppers, or like mushrooms, like that is like pizza and Cabernet Franc are like BFFs, like till the cows come home.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I love it with mushroom risotto too, a lot.
Oh
It's
gosh, yeah.
perfect for me. That's like the perfect pairing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in the boonies, unfortunately. So there's like, I'm in a pizza desert here where I live. So I would probably have Cabernet Franc pizza way more often if I didn't live in a pizza desert. But I reserve those moments for when I'm in like a really good like pizza vicinity, and I'm like, okay, Cab Franc plus pizza, here we go. Let's do this.
That.
But yeah, I think it's those would probably be my top three.
Yummy.
Yum. Well, what's coming up for you, Allison? What's on the horizon for Cab Franc Chronicles, and also any other like new projects that you're considering doing?
Oh, yeah, Cab Franc Chronicles is it's 3 years in. I launched it in October 2020. So we're 3 years into this effort, and I have a full-time job that pays my bills. And Cabernet Franc Chronicles is what I kind of do on the side. But it's grown into more than I could have ever anticipated. So last year I did quite a few different consumer events and other activities. This year is still kind of coming together. I'm actually traveling to the Loire next week. They have these big trade events that happen literally over the course of like 4 days. There's like back to back trade events. So I'm doing a little bit of a whirlwind tour to the Loire so that I can hit these trade shows and taste and meet with some people, which I'm super looking forward to because it's been a year since I've been back in the Loire. And then besides that, I'm actually heading to, at the end of April, I'm heading to Chinon to do some work and kind of do how would I call it? Like an immersive little visit with the Chinon appellation, which I'm looking forward to. So it'll be like a full, 4 or 5 day program just in Chinon, which is kind of cool. Like to spend that much time in a single, little tiny appellation is really exciting. But really, I'm focused on doing what I do, which includes my videos that I put out, which are very basic, low production value videos with my phone. But I also I've launched a newsletter this year, so I'm going to start focusing a little bit more writing. And quite frankly, this effort is kind of a bit of a bootstrapping effort where I have a full-time job and I only get so much vacation time. And so, I'm just doing what I can and assessing opportunities as they come available. Hopefully I can do some more consumer events this year. We'll see, but nothing is like too firm in the calendar at this point, but you never know what, this time last year, I had 0 in my calendar, and then the year kind of just blew up and all these kinds of things kind of came my way. So we will, we'll see how this year goes. I'm optimistic though. I'm very grateful for everybody that's been super supportive, and it's been fun so far.
It's exciting. So if we wanted to follow you on your journey, where would we find you? How can we watch your videos or connect with your newsletter?
Well, the newsletter is on Substack, and it's free at the moment. And in terms of the videos, I post them every other week to Instagram as well as YouTube. So they are on both platforms, but I do spend most of my time on Instagram because I really When I launched the project back in 2020, writing came really was a challenge for me. It scares me to death to sit at a computer and type things. It would be like that blinking cursor that you're just like, it would just cause me to clam up. And so that's why the whole video thing kind of came about. But I chose Instagram because I wanted to be able to connect with people and have conversations with people and see what other people were drinking. And that's been the real joy is these connections and meeting people like, you two, and, because you find people in all walks of life, all corners of the world. That's as much as Instagram is a pain in the ass at the best of times with all their updates and changes and garbage. At the end of the day, it has shrunk the world for everyone, and you can connect with people all over the place. So that's where I spend most of my time. And of course, I do my quizzes, which I know Cindy is very. She's a regular quiz taker. So yeah, I have my Instagram.
Never have I felt such a sense of accomplishment when I get 3 or more right on your quiz.
Oh my gosh, that quiz. Funny story, only because it's coming up on. So next week is the official 3-year anniversary of the quiz,
okay.
Which is bonkers, because I've literally done the quiz every single Wednesday for 3 years straight.
Wow.
I have not missed a day. And I remember back this was, January 2021. A very dear friend of mine, Amanda Fraga, who is the beverage director at a restaurant group in Miami. We're still in the COVID times ish. And she says to me, Allison, what's really good for engagement on Instagram? Quizzes. And I was like, uh-huh. She's like, so you should do a quiz. And I'm like, on Cabernet Franc. She's like, yes. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, are you freaking crazy? Like, how am I going to do a quiz on Cabernet Franc? And she's like, you have to make sure you're consistent, and it has to be the same time, the same day, every week. Otherwise, people won't take it because they're not going to know that it's happening. And I was like, how the hell am I going to do a quiz on one grape variety?
Right.
Once
every
a
week.
So anyway, I said, okay, let's give this a whirl. So the first few weeks I started to basically what happened is I started to go back into my videos, and I started to watch my videos and go, oh, well, I can make a question from that little clip. I can make a question from this little snippet. So I literally just started building questions from my videos and the content that was in those videos. And then the crazy thing is that then the quiz started to fuel the videos, because I kept thinking in my head as I was preparing for these videos, it's like, I need quiz questions. I need quiz questions. So I was like trying to, find factoids and find all these kinds of things for the videos so that I had this like kind of arsenal of things that I could draw from to build the quizzes. And here we are, like almost 3 years later, next week, to doing the quiz, which is hilarious because
I love that though. That's great. No, cheers to 3 years. That's really wonderful.
I love that quiz.
I think that's great.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome. And I have to say, like, shout out to every single, like, the Cindy's of the world that are religious, like, not just religious, but uber competitive with regards to the quiz. And like, sometimes I have controversial questions where people are like, really? Like, is that really the answer? And they're like coming at me, and I'm like, listen, yes, that's the answer. Like, but no, it's absolutely outstanding. So I'm so I love everyone that is on Instagram and that is part of this little fun journey that I'm on with this grape variety, because it makes it so much more entertaining for sure.
Absolutely.
Well,
that's
I
great.
love the quiz so much.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to link Cab Franc Chronicles in the story bio, so that way people can pop in and find you and
of course
see how knowledgeable they can become.
It is, it's an exciting, the grape is cool. Like there's lots of grapes out there, of course, but I think Cabernet Franc in general needs a little bit more love. It's not as famous as all the other ones, but it's a really old grape variety. It's older, it's the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Carmenere. It's the parent of a couple grapes from the Basque region in Spain. It's a very important grape variety in the world of wine, and we wouldn't have a lot of wines and grapes today if it wasn't for Cabernet Franc. So it's definitely a grape that is worth exploring.
Cheers to that as well. That's perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. It was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you, Allison. You're a rock star, and I have learned so much from you. So thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to have you on.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said at the beginning, any excuse to chat Cabernet Franc with folks that are willing to listen to me babble on. I'm all for it.
Anytime.
Part 1, Cab Franc. We'll have
absolutely
part 1.
Well, cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, so much. Cheers.
It was a pleasure.